All right, let's shake things up a bit. Up to this point, we've been working with a very clean, very simple data model containing one single fact table, our sales data table. But in reality, sometimes things can get a little bit more complicated than that. So imagine a data model that looks like this. In this case, we actually have two fact tables. We have the sales data table here in yellow, which contains transactional records. And now we have a new returns data table here in green that contains information about returns being made. And you may notice that there's no way to directly relate these two fact tables together. There's no primary foreign key relationship. There's no valid one-to-many cardinality because we have duplicate values for all of the foreign keys in these tables: product key, date, territory key, etc. But what we can do is connect each of these fact tables to any related lookup or dimension tables in our model. In other words, we can wire in this returns data table and connect it to lookups just like we did with our sales data table. And when we do that, something magical happens. It means we can filter values from both of them, like order quantities and return quantities, using fields from any shared lookup tables. Now, the key word here is shared, right? And what this means is that we could view order quantity and return quantity by any field in the product lookup table, like the product name, product color, or SKU, because we have relationships between each of our fact tables, right? Sales data and returns data. But note that we don't have a customer key in our returns table, and therefore we cannot create a relationship to our customer lookup. And this is very common in the real world because you may have data from 5, 10, 20 different sources, and it's unlikely that all of those tables will contain the exact same comprehensive set of foreign keys. In other words, some of them may only be able to connect to a subset of dimension tables in your model. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. And the implication of that is that while we can break down our sales data values using fields from the customer lookup table, like gender or occupation, we can't break down any values from our returns data table in that same way. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like once we actually load this data into our model. But the key takeaway here, the most important point, is that generally speaking, fact tables should connect through shared dimension tables, not directly to one another. So with that, let's jump into Power BI. Let's open up our AdventureWorks report. We're going to load in this returns data fact table and create the relationships that we need to connect it into our model. All right, so go ahead and open up your AdventureWorks report Power BI file. Make sure you're following along. What we're going to do is now load in our returns data. That's going to be the last table that we're going to integrate into our model. So we're going to head to Home, Get Data from Text CSV, and I'm going to navigate to the folder containing my CSV files. And this is the one I want, AdventureWorks Return Data. We're going to get our preview pane here. Pretty simple table. We just have the return date, a territory key, a product key, and the return quantity here. This is that numerical field that we're going to want to analyze and aggregate and filter using fields from related lookup tables. So let's go ahead and transform this data to open up the query editor. And we're not going to do much here. We're just going to confirm that our header row is promoted and that data types look good. So return date is a date. We've got whole numbers for territory key, product key, and return quantity, which looks good. And all we're going to do is update the query or table name to just returns data, and that should do the trick. So let's go ahead and close and apply. We should see that table pop up right here in our model view once it's done loading. And we couldn't see it, but it looks like it dropped it right over here off to the side. So let's drag that in. I'm going to pull it down here kind of next to my sales data to make clear that this is a second fact table. And then again, just like we talked about, there's no way that I could connect these tables together. In fact, even if I tried to, using fields like product key, you see that I get a many-to-many relationship error. So like we talked about, I'm going to take the same approach that we did with our sales data table and connect our returns data table to any lookup or dimension tables with a matching primary key. So let's just go in order here. Product key is going to connect to the product key field in the product lookup table. Looks good. The return date is going to connect to the date field in our calendar. Looks good. The territory key will connect to the sales territory key in our territory lookup. We're just left with our return quantity field, which contains our numerical values. And again, we do not have a customer key, which means we have no way to connect that to our customer lookup table. In other words, we know which product was returned, we know when it was returned, and we know where it was returned, but we don't know which customer made the return. So that looks good. We've configured all of the relationships in our data model here. You can kind of drag around and resize to make it nice and clear. And just to kind of hammer this point home, let's jump back to report view. We're going to keep using this little matrix visual that we created here. And this time, instead of just showing order quantity on values, let's also add some data from that new returns data field. We're going to pull in return quantity. It's going to default to a sum. And we can see those values broken down, in this case, by country, which is a valid filter because it comes from the territory lookup, which is a shared dimension table between both our sales and our returns tables. Same story should hold true if we grab a field from a different shared lookup table, like products. Let's pull in product style, for instance. That looks good. We see the values broken down. But remember what happens if we tried to pull in a field from customer lookup, which is only connected to sales. Let's see how these values break down by education level, for instance. Note that the order quantities look good. They're broken down for each education level row, but we see that same repeating grand total for our return quantities. And just like we talked about at the very beginning of this section, those repeated grand total values are almost always a sign of a missing or invalid relationship, which is exactly the case here. All right, so now we have our fully built, fully configured data model. Next up, I want to drill a little bit deeper into an extremely important data modeling topic called filter flow. Stay tuned.